Okay, so today we are really diving deep into the world of Provence wine.
Ah,
Based on
Provence.
all this amazing material we have to work with today,
Yeah.
our mission is to really extract the essential knowledge about this region,
Yeah.
so celebrated and recognized around the world
Absolute.
for its wine. So looking at the history, the land, the grapes that thrive there, and what makes the wine so distinctive.
Yeah, I mean, the very name Provence just evokes, I think for a lot of us, so many images, right? Lavender fields and sunny landscapes and that relaxed Mediterranean lifestyle.
Absolutely.
And while, that's certainly part of the appeal of Provence, I think what we find when we dive deeper into the wine world, there is a tradition that goes, as deep or deeper than anywhere else in France.
Right, and it's interesting because today, we think of Provence and we think of rosé,
Right.
but the history of winemaking in Provence goes way back, and your sources reveal that it's actually one of the oldest winemaking histories in all of France,
Wow.
dating all the way back to the Greeks in the 6th century BC.
The grapes, yeah.
Yeah, around Marseille.
Well, I mean, when you think about the arc of wine history and you think about the Greeks, they were just so pivotal in spreading viticulture, really, all over the Mediterranean.
Right.
Um, and it's so interesting to think about Provence being right at the heart of that
Yeah.
expansion in what would eventually become France, right?
Right. Yeah, and then the Romans come along,
Hmm.
who were famously practical, but also enjoyed their wine.
They love their wine.
And they further developed, viticulture there in Provence and recognizing its potential and expanding the vineyards.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just, a regional thing.
Right.
The wines from Provence were consumed across the whole Roman Empire.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to think that the Romans were not only planting vines, but they were also developing winemaking techniques, building infrastructure,
Right.
really kind of setting a strong foundation for what was to come over the next several centuries.
And then, of course, we move forward to the Middle Ages, and we see monasteries and nobility
Mhm.
playing key roles in not only preserving but advancing winemaking in Provence.
Absolutely.
The monks cultivated the
Right.
vineyards,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the nobility saw wine as a symbol of status and prestige.
Yeah, it's so important, I think, to understand this continuous thread of winemaking in Provence
Right.
and especially the monasteries as really kind of repositories of knowledge, not just of, religious texts, but also agricultural practices. And
Right.
viticulture was really key among those. And then, of course, you have the nobility who are helping to ensure the economic viability of winemaking during those times.
Right, and no history unfolds, without its challenges.
Right.
And over the centuries, Provence faced its share of, ups and downs,
Right.
economic shifts, crises,
Yeah.
and the phylloxera epidemic of the 19th century,
Right. Right.
which led to a major restructuring of the vineyards.
Absolutely. I mean, phylloxera was a turning point for so many wine regions all over Europe, and,
Yeah.
and Provence is no exception. And it really forced this complete rethinking of how vineyards were planted, selection of rootstocks that were resistant to the pest.
Right.
But ultimately, it really played a significant role in shaping the viticultural landscape that we see today.
Right, and then in the 20th century, you see this huge rise of rosé, which has become almost synonymous with Provence.
Yeah,
But your sources make clear this wasn't just an accident.
right.
It was a real transformation driven by adapting to, what consumers were looking for
Right.
and a commitment to quality.
Yeah, the insightful part of this, I think, is how Provence didn't abandon completely its history of, producing red and white wines, but really kind of embraced rosé as a way to carve out a niche and to really appeal to this changing consumer, palate.
Right, right, and it certainly worked. Absolutely. Today Provence rosé is a global benchmark
Right.
for quality rosé.
It's really a testament to their ability to adapt and to innovate, I think,
Right.
and to really focus on what they do well,
Yeah.
which is to produce, world-class rosé.
Yeah. Okay. So let's really dig into what makes this region so well suited to winemaking,
Yeah.
and the terroir of Provence. The climate and geography play a huge role.
Huge role.
And we're talking about classic Mediterranean climate here, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Hot, dry summers, mild winters, tons of sunshine.
Yeah.
It sounds perfect for growing grapes.
It really is. I mean, that Mediterranean climate, it provides warmth and consistency that allows those grapes to ripen fully and evenly. And the sunshine is just so crucial for photosynthesis,
Right.
right? Which is the engine that drives the development of all those sugars and flavors and aromas and the grape berries.
And then you have the Mistral wind.
Ugh, good Mistral.
Which, is so often mentioned, when talking about Provence.
Right.
But it's more than just a breeze.
It's more than a breeze.
It actually plays a really important role for the vines.
It does. It does. The Mistral is, a powerful wind. It can be pretty intense,
Right.
but it acts as this ally to the grape growers of Provence because it helps to dry out the vines after rainfall, which is so important in preventing fungal diseases.
Okay.
And it also helps to moderate temperatures in the vineyards.
It's like natural air conditioning.
It is. It is. So you think about other Mediterranean regions that sometimes struggle with humidity. This is a huge advantage that the Mistral brings to Provence and really helps reduce the need for chemical intervention.
Right. So now let's talk about, what's under those vines.
Yeah.
The soil, the diverse soils of Provence.
Right.
And your sources highlight a real mosaic of different types.
It is, yeah.
Beginning with limestone,
Right.
Which is often found, closer to the coast.
Right.
What are some of the specific characteristics that limestone imparts to the wines?
Well, limestone soils tend to impart this really vibrant acidity
Okay.
and a distinct minerality to the wines. And that's especially noticeable in the roses, that real sort of calcium carbonate in those limestone soils really, influences the pH of the grapes, which gives them that sort of bright, refreshing acidity. And then also limestone is porous, so it aids drainage, which can create a little stress for the vines. But that can actually be a good thing because it concentrates the flavors in the fruit. So you often get these lighter-bodied, very aromatic wines with a real sense of freshness and sometimes even this kind of stony or chalky quality.
And then, you also have clay soils,
Right.
often, mixed in with the limestone.
Yeah.
And what does the clay component bring to the wines?
Well, clay brings a different dimension, I think, to the wines. Because it adds more body and structure, you tend to find richer, more full-flavored wines, both red and rosé, grown on these clay soils. And the reason for that is the clay actually helps retain water.
Okay.
So during those dry periods, that can be a really beneficial quality. And it really contributes a certain weight and textural richness to those wines.
And then there's schist, which is particularly important in subregions like Bandol.
Yeah.
What makes schist so special for growing grapes?
Schist is interesting. It has this really interesting ability to retain heat.
Okay.
And this is really advantageous for some of the red grape varieties like Mourvedre, which need a lot of warmth to ripen. And so the schist really helps to ensure consistent ripening, and it contributes to the complex aromas and the structure that we find in, say, those red wines from Bandol.
And speaking of subregions, Provence isn't just one uniform area. Right. You have these different areas like the Côte de Provence, Côte d'Aix-en-Provence, Bandol, each with their own kind of characteristics.
Absolutely. I mean, Côte de Provence is the largest appellation and really kind of known for those light, fresh, fruity rosés. That's sort of the quintessential image I think a lot of people have when they think of Provence rosé.
Right, and Côte d'Aix-en-Provence.
Yeah, so Côte d'Aix-en-Provence is a bit warmer, a bit drier, and so it tends to yield these fuller-bodied rosés.
Okay.
And also produces some elegant red wines as well. And that's really due to, a slightly longer growing season and a bit of a different soil composition.
Okay, and then of course Bandol, as we mentioned, known for those powerful age-worthy reds, primarily based on Mourvedre.
Right.
But they make rosés there too, right?
They do. And those rosés tend to have a bit more intensity and structure than those from, say, Côte de Provence.
Okay.
And they often have a greater capacity for aging as well because of that Mourvedre in the blend.
And you also have other subregions like Côte de Provence, Saint-Victoire, and
La Chalette.
Palette.
That's right.
Each with their own kind of specialties.
Each one with their own kind of microclimate and soil composition and really sort of unique character of wine.
And, speaking of terroir, your sources also mention the importance of the topography and the sun exposure of the vineyards.
Right.
How do those things factor in?
Well, a lot of Provence is quite hilly.
Okay.
And the way those vineyards are planted in relation to the sun creates a real multitude of different microclimates.
Right.
So, south-facing slopes that get the most sun, throughout the day tend to yield grapes with a higher level of ripeness.
Okay.
And so that leads to fuller-bodied wines with more concentrated flavors, whereas north-facing slopes tend to produce grapes that are higher in acidity and have a slightly lighter aromatic profile. So it's really all about, finding that balance, matching the grape to the site.
Right. Okay. Well, let's talk about the grapes now.
Yeah.
The grape varieties that thrive in Provence, and we've mentioned a few, but let's go through the key red grape varieties.
Okay.
And Grenache seems to be the most widely planted.
It is, absolutely.
In Provence.
Yeah, Grenache is really a cornerstone of winemaking in Provence, especially for those rosés.
Okay.
It's a grape that gives you that beautiful pale color.
Okay.
Those sort of lovely red fruit aromas, strawberry, raspberry. And often that kind of subtle sweetness that you find in those wines.
Think Syrah.
Syrah. So, familiar grape from all over the world.
Right.
But in Provence, it adds a layer of structure.
Okay.
To the wines, along with, darker fruit notes, blackberry, blackcurrant.
Right.
A bit of spice, black pepper.
Okay.
Even some floral notes to both the rosies and the reds.
And more Vedra we've talked about.
Vedra, yeah.
Really seems to be a very powerful grape.
It is. It gives deep color, dark fruit flavors.
Right.
But also these really interesting herbal and earthy notes that add a lot of complexity. And it's key in those, really concentrated age-worthy reds of Bandol.
Right.
But it can also add structure and depth to some of the rosés as well.
And what about Cinsault?
Cinsault, no, Cinsault is a much lighter, more delicate, aromatic variety.
Okay.
Highly valued in rosé production for its freshness. Okay.
Those sort of bright, light red fruit aromas like cherry, red currant.
Right.
And a lovely floral character as well. And it really plays a role in the overall elegance, vibrancy of a lot of those Provence rosés.
And Tiburon.
Tiburon. So Tiburon is a native grape variety that you find particularly in the coastal areas of Provence.
Okay.
And it offers these really distinctive wild red fruit, herbaceous kind of Mediterranean herb and spicy notes, really something unique to that region.
Okay, now let's talk about the white grape varieties that thrive in Provence.
Okay.
And Roll, which is also known as Vermentino.
Right.
Seems to be the main white grape.
The main white grape, yeah, and it contributes this really complex array of aromas.
Okay.
You get citrus, lemon, grapefruit, white fruits, pear, apple, floral notes, orange blossom.
Okay.
Some herbal undertones, and all of that is kind of underpinned by a really vibrant acidity. And Ugni Blanc is also mentioned in your sources.
Right.
And, we see Ugni Blanc used in blends in other parts of France.
Right.
What's its role in Provence?
Its role in Provence is often in blends, valued for its high acidity.
Right.
And those sort of subtle white fruit aromas.
Right.
It really provides a backbone of freshness and liveliness.
Right.
To those white wines.
And Claret, another native white grape?
Yeah, Claret is another important native white grape. It offers these delicate white fruit aromas, peach, apricot, floral notes, and really contributes a sense of elegance and kind of a roundness to those white blends.
And, it seems like blending is really key.
Absolutely.
To Provence winemaking.
Absolutely. I mean, the vast majority of the wines in Provence, especially those rosés, are blends.
Right.
And it's about each grape contributing its own unique character. And the winemaker, is really skilled at at combining these different elements to achieve that balance and complexity.
Okay, now, obviously having the right grapes planted in the right soil is huge.
Yeah.
But how the vines are cared for and managed, the viticultural practices,
Absolutely.
Also a key part
Trojan.
of the story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And your sources detail how, the grape varieties are really well suited and adapted.
They are, yeah.
To the climate in Provence.
Yeah, through, both natural selection and the choices of growers over the years.
Right.
The grapes that we find planted there today, have these inherent characteristics that allow them to thrive in that hot, dry Mediterranean climate. Things like relatively small leaves, which helps them conserve water.
Yeah.
Deep root systems that allow them to access water deep in the soil. And then, of course, that Mistral wind that we talked about, helps to keep the vines healthy as well.
Okay, so, the natural conditions provide a solid foundation.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of human intervention.
Oh, absolutely.
And, expertise that goes into managing the vineyards.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the key management practices.
Okay.
Pruning is always an important aspect.
Absolutely.
Of viticulture.
Right.
What are some of the techniques they use in Provence?
So in Provence, you'll commonly see techniques like guyot and cordon de roya.
Okay.
And these are really designed to help control the vigor of the vine. Ensuring that it's not producing too many grapes.
Right.
Which can dilute the qualities of the fruit, but also to really optimize the exposure of the grapes to sunlight and air circulation, which is so important for healthy ripening.
And yield control is crucial.
Absolutely.
For quality wine.
Yeah.
What are some other ways that they manage that beyond pruning?
So yield control, starts with pruning.
Right.
It involves, selecting grape clusters, as they're developing.
Right.
Growers will often remove, less promising bunches or damaged bunches.
Okay.
And some vineyards will also employ green harvesting, where they're actually removing unripe bunches of grapes early in a growing season.
To reduce yield? To
reduce the yield. And that's, essentially it's about allowing those remaining grapes to receive more of the vine's resources, so it concentrates flavors, aromas, really, really kind of ups the quality.
Okay, and what about, cultivation techniques in general?
Yeah.
Things like canopy management and how they treat the soil.
Yeah, so canopy management is really important. And that can involve, things like trimming leaves to allow more airflow around the grape bunches, allowing for more sunlight to penetrate. And this is all about, preventing fungal diseases and ensuring even ripening soil management practices vary quite a bit, depending on the vineyard and the grower.
Okay.
But they can include things like tilling, incorporating organic matter to improve the structure and fertility of the soil.
Okay.
Planting cover crops between the rows to help prevent erosion.
Right.
And also the choice of rootstock is really crucial. The rootstock being that base onto which the grape variety is grafted.
Right.
And that can have a huge impact on the vigor of the vine. Its resistance to pests and diseases and its ability to thrive in the particular soil.
Okay. So, it really sounds like a very hands-on approach.
Well, very much so.
To growing grapes.
Yeah.
And of course, there are challenges in any agricultural region.
Right.
Drought seems like a particularly significant one.
Huge one.
In a climate that's so, sunny and dry.
Right.
So how do growers in Provence contend with the lack of water?
Yeah, water scarcity is a major issue in Provence.
Yeah.
And growers are addressing it in a variety of ways. One is selecting drought-resistant grape varieties.
Okay.
And planting those, where it's permitted and sustainable, they'll use efficient irrigation techniques.
Okay.
Like drip irrigation, where the water is delivered directly to the roots of the vines.
Right.
So you're minimizing evaporation.
And wildfires are also, risk.
Yeah, wildfires are a serious risk.
Particularly in a Mediterranean climate like that.
Absolutely, yeah.
What do they do to try to prevent that?
Well, preventative measures are really key.
Right.
Creating fire breaks,
Right.
around the vineyards to help stop the spread of fire, keeping the undergrowth clear to reduce the fuel load.
Right.
Those are all important strategies.
And what about diseases?
Diseases are a constant, potential threat.
Right.
The main ones in Provence tend to be fungal diseases like downy mildew and powdery mildew.
Right.
And the way they manage those is really through good vineyard practices, air circulation, to reduce humidity, and then, if necessary, treatments. But there's a real emphasis on using sustainable organic methods whenever possible.
And then you have, this global issue that we can't avoid talking about, climate change.
Yeah.
How's that affecting viticulture in Provence?
Well, I mean, rising temperatures and changing rainfall patterns are definitely having an impact. And so it's really a process of adaptation, considering perhaps planting different grape varieties that might be better suited to the changing conditions, adjusting irrigation strategies, the timing of pruning and harvesting.
Right.
It's really an ongoing process.
Right. But it's encouraging to see this movement towards sustainability.
Yeah.
And organic farming practices.
A huge movement.
In Provence.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real awareness among a lot of the growers there of the need to prioritize, the environment, to conserve resources, to promote the long-term health of their vineyards, and that involves so many different things. Water management, renewable energy, reducing the use of chemicals in the vineyards, protecting biodiversity. It's really a more holistic approach to winemaking.
Okay, let's transition now from the vineyard to the winery.
Yeah.
And talk about some of the winemaking techniques and different styles of wine that are produced in Provence.
Okay.
And let's start with rosé.
Okay.
Which of course is so closely associated with the region.
Absolutely.
What are the main methods that are used to craft rosé in Provence?
Well, the most common technique for producing those pale, kind of delicate Provence rosés is short maceration.
Okay.
And this basically involves allowing those crushed red grapes to have a brief period of contact with their skins, just long enough to extract the color and some of the aromas, but not too much tannin.
And then you have saignée, which is often translated as bleeding off.
Bleeding off, yeah.
Of juice. How does that work?
So saignée involves essentially removing a portion of the pink juice from a tank of red grapes that have just started to ferment. And so that juice that's been in contact with the skins is then fermented separately to make a rosé. And rosés made using this method tend to have a deeper color and a little bit more structure and intensity than those made with short maceration. And
then the third method that you mentioned is direct pressing.
Right. So direct pressing is just as it sounds. You're pressing those whole bunches of red grapes without any crushing or maceration. And this technique produces rosés that are very pale, very delicate in their aromas and flavors, and possess this real freshness and vibrancy.
So, the winemakers in Provence, have these different methods to create, a whole range of rosé styles. What about red wine production in Provence?
Okay, so red wine production involves a much longer maceration. And that extended contact between the grape juice and the skins allows for greater extraction of color, of tannins, and those flavor compounds. And then some of the higher end red wines might also be fermented and aged in oak barrels, which adds additional complexity structure and those oak derived aromas.